thank you for joining us today, Brett, for the HQTS Industry Expert Interview Series. Fantastic for you to hear and give your insight. So before we begin, would it be possible to give yourself a brief introduction about you and Apparel Insider for our audience?
Sure, Andrew. My name's Brett Matthews. I've been a journalist for 25 years or so. I started focusing on textiles and apparel about 10 years ago, and I set up Apparel Insider as a website and printed publication just under 5 years ago, and we're sort of read by sustainability teams at brands and retailers, fashion brands and retailers, should I say, globally. And we've got a heavy presence on social media and LinkedIn as well.
Brilliant. Well, it's great to have you here to kind of talk about sustainability as our main topic.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Great. Yeah. So first question for you today, Brett, is what are textile sustainability challenges that companies actually deal with today?
Yeah, okay. I think this falls into sort of three parts, really. The first one is sort of regulation and legislation. We're seeing an increase in, well, I say an increase, we're seeing an increase in regulation around sort of greenwashing, and we're seeing more and more moves at European and, in the UK, for instance, and the US, around brands making sustainability claims. We've had these claims around for years, but now the authorities are saying, you're making these claims, let's prove them, let's see if they're true, let's see if they hold water. So I think regulation is a big one. It always will be, but I think it's becoming more heightened in the current climate. The second one, which is always ongoing, is consumer and NGO challenges, which, NGOs are massively influential in the textile and apparel space. You've got the likes of Greenpeace, Clean Clothes Campaign, the Worker Rights Consortium in the US, and these place a lot of pressure on brands and retailers to do the right thing. And if they don't do the right thing, they'll be there to sort of name and shame them. And so brands have got to watch out there for the sort of reputational challenges which these NGOs might pose. And the final challenge really is internal. I think most brands now have sort of large and very focused and experienced sustainability teams, and these sustainability teams, as well as focusing on sustainability, have a sort of place on the board. They have a place at the top of organisations, and they are pushing the sort of director board level within the company to do the right thing, to source more sustainably, to clean their act up generally. So that's placing an added pressure on the heads of organisations to get things right. So I'd say it's threefold there. It's regulatory, it's NGO, and it's internal, about doing the right thing as a business.
Yeah, great, wonderful. I definitely agree with you that there's a big push right now for a lot of organizations, these sustainable teams, to trickle that down throughout the rest of the organization, and that takes time to move things over. Yeah, so
absolutely,
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So kind of moving on from that, and we talk about trickling down and sustainability within organizations. How do businesses ensure that they're actually sourcing sustainable products?
Yeah, that's a tough question, actually, because it's if we think about it in the fashion space, most big brands and retailers are sourcing from other countries, from Asia, basically. So you've got brands in the West sourcing from partners and suppliers often in Southeast Asia, but also Turkey and increasingly in Africa as well. So you've kind of got a business model which is where your suppliers are quite far removed from you. So it can be difficult to keep a handle on if these suppliers are sustainable, if they're doing the right thing, if they're taking consideration of the environment, that kind of thing. So it becomes a case of, this is quite a general answer, is looking to work with suppliers which have a good market reputation. I think I think size can help it in that sense. If they've been around a few years, if other big brands are using them, and word of mouth in the industry. If a supplier is doing a lot of illegal subcontracting and sort of cutting corners, things will still get that. Stories like that will soon get out, and you read about it in the papers and stuff. So I think word of mouth is quite important in our industry. People do talk a lot. Standards and accreditations. What standards is your supplier working to? For instance, Architects, Blue Sign, have they got all these standards, which I think those two are very big ones in our industry. Architects and Blue Sign, they're very well respected, and it's hard to cut corners if you're adhering to those standards. A lot more suppliers now working with the Sustainable Apparel Coalition and its HIG index, and I think that's another standard which brands are increasingly looking towards and asking their suppliers to work towards as a course of doing business with them. In also sourcing sustainably, I think the most important one for me, if you're going to source sustainably, is to get a handle on inventories. How much are you sourcing, and how smartly are you sourcing to keep inventories down, so that you're not sort of creating waste and you're not having clothing go to landfill or being incinerated. I think that's quite rare in our industry these days, but you do see, we have had instances in the past few years where big brands in particular have sourced far too much. They've got the sums all wrong, and they've ended up with all this excess stock which goes and floods the market. Some of it ends up in Africa, some in Asia, and they kind of lose a bit of control over their sourcing model. I think brands generally are getting better at logistics, but that to me would be the most important thing you could do overall, is to get a handle on inventories and keep waste to an absolute minimum. Just one final thought that's come into my head there thinking about it is look at recycled options. There are increasing amounts of those on the marketplace. How can you fit a percentage of recycled options into your sourcing mix, which most big brands are doing these days?
Yeah, brilliant. I think definitely that's fantastic what you're saying, especially, organizations need to be very clear with how they're sourcing stuff and doing a lot of in-depth research and communicating with internal processes and also with manufacturers to make sure it's, sustainable.
Absolutely, yeah.
So as we moved on with kind of organizations, as you were saying there, what can manufacturers do to reduce their impact on the environment, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think most studies agree that about 90% of carbon emissions occur in manufacturing supply chains. So brands in recent years, we've seen a lot of them move towards renewable energy in their own stores and their own operations, by introducing, solar panels on roofs, that kind of thing. But that's only that's what you call the low-hanging fruit of the industry. The real, the real impact will come in supply chains. So that's why we need to focus on manufacturers. And I think by far the biggest thing manufacturers can do is shift to renewable energy options, which some of them are doing. Some of them are doing this with the support of their supplier, brands and retailers, their customers. Some of them are getting involved in industry initiatives, such as the International Finance Corporation has it's got an initiative involved in lending money to manufacturers, and it's working with some brands such as Levi's on introducing water saving technologies, energy saving technologies, that kind of thing. So there are quite a few initiatives about, but when it comes to it, we've still got an extremely high level of coal powered manufacturing in apparel supply chains, particularly in China. And that's something the industry needs to look at, really, because the Chinese government is still investing heavily in coal, which is a bit of a concern for the industry. In terms of reducing environmental impacts, effluent treatment, high quality effluent treatment is very important. Is it in operation in supply chains? Is it always switched on? Is it always being used? Retailers need to be asking these questions of their suppliers. Cleaner production techniques, a massive thing in supply chains at the moment. To offer one example, in the sort of denim supply chain, a lot of manufacturers are looking towards new sort of laser etching techniques, which massively reduce impact, and it's also safer for workers as well. And the final thing is, again, it's, manufacturers can look at waste, ways to cut down on waste. The manufacture of clothing is notoriously inefficient. You've got a lot of offcuts and waste. What are they doing with that? Is it being going to landfill, or can they look at ways to reuse that waste, by introducing recycled lines, which I know that some manufacturers are doing. So it's those four things, I'd say: renewable energy, clean effluent treatment, cleaner production techniques, and waste and inventory reduction.
Brilliant. I think it's really great that you said, with this big shift and kind of moving towards sustainability, that technology is also coming along with that in mind, as you're saying about the kind of laser etching. I think that's brilliant. And again, trying to keep things circular, trying to keep that circular in their processes. Again, brilliant.
Definitely.
Well, moving on from that one, actually, I get you kind of answered some of the next question, but I'll ask
sure.
Is that
I do tend to get carried away.
No, it's brilliant. Please carry away. How can businesses work more efficiently with their suppliers to increase sustainability across the processes when it comes to producing garments? And if you could think of a case study or an example, that'd be amazing as well.
Yeah. I think increasingly we're seeing fashion brands and retailers looking to work more closely with their suppliers. So there are some statistics about it. I know the big brands have reduced and rationalized the supply base in the past five years or so. There was a recent McKinsey study out about this, saying that they've all cut down by sort of 20-30% in some cases. They're looking to work with a smaller collection of reputable and responsible suppliers, and to build, and so in that way they can work more closely and work on particular projects and collaborations and initiatives. So I think that's a really positive move by the industry, and hopefully it'll sort of weed out some of the less reputable suppliers and send a message to the industry that if you want to produce fashion and clothing, you've got to meet certain standards and criteria. To offer some examples, we're seeing a lot of collaborations in between suppliers and fashion at the moment, and this is kind of an interesting one. Recently was there's a Danish brand called Bestseller, which produces clothing such as Jack and Jones, jeans, that kind of thing. And they've recently been working with Artistic Milliners, which is a Pakistani denim mill, and they have created a sort of farm to fashion traceability for indigenous organic cotton. So you've got cotton going direct from farmers through to artistic milliners and into the clothing of Bestseller. And it's fully traceable. That they're able to tell where right down to the farm level, and this is great for the farmers. It means they're getting a fair price for the products. It's great for artistic milliners. They've got this security of supply chain, and it's also good for Bestseller because they can tell the story of this clothing and tell consumers about how they're helping farmers, and they're also using organic cotton, which organic cotton is sort of seen as the gold standard in our industry because it doesn't use pesticides, uses less water, that kind of thing.
Brilliant. I think it's so positive to hear that these large businesses, large brands are taking on this social responsibility to supporting things for honest and clear supply chains, as you were saying. So I think that's a really positive move forward, hopefully in the future, and to support the environment. So last question for you today. So moving on to how do textile businesses handle and manage the quality of their products, and if they need to adapt them to the requirements of each market, adhering to sustainability?
Yeah, this is probably the toughest question of all, because I think all I'd say a few points is, one, it's a process of continuous improvement. It's such a fluid marketplace is fashion and textiles and supply chains, and we're seeing more of that because of the coronavirus pandemic. With it, the markets, I'd say at the moment, I mean, a bit of a state of flux, and I think we're going to see that for the next 12 months or so, and even longer. Who knows? Who knows with the way the pandemic has gone? So I'd say that, but more generally, you look at continuous improvement. This is not a sort of static marketplace. The parameters are changing all the time, and so I'd offer some general pointers here. One is to continue to be abreast of new regulations within individual markets. At EU level, we're seeing so many new regulations coming and onto the market in the fashion space, and this is going to amplify the next 12 to 18 months. We're seeing some really big moves there. New market trends, always be abreast of these by following the industry press and whatnot. New customer requirements, we're seeing among younger consumers, we're seeing more demand for sustainable products. I think among younger consumers, we see sort of slight polarization. On the one side, you've got younger, sort of very environmentally conscious consumers who want sustainability, but then on the other side, you've got ones who are less sort of so, and they're very much into ultra fast fashion, and they don't seem to have much regard for the environmental and sustainability side. It's all about price. So you've got those two sort of diverged marketplaces there. And finally, the final part says, what is your definition of sustainability? Because it seems to be sort of changing, and it's quite a fluid word. What does it mean to you? What do we mean by sustainable? What do we mean by sustainable cotton? What do we mean by sustainable polyester? Is recycled polyester more sustainable than conventional? That kind of thing. So just keep abreast of the conversations that are going on within the industry. It's changing all the time, but it's also an exciting and interesting industry to be involved in.
Yeah, fantastic. I think great. I definitely think I agree with you when they said that, there's a very polarization when it comes to market trends and people's opinions. You're right. People are very much pushing with stuff like Extinction Rebellion and the younger audiences. And then so there's, like you said, there is that, 50-50 split. Great.
Yeah.
Quick question for you. In terms of, as well as, textile businesses, how do you value getting help from third parties, to be able to assist in that supply chain and make sure things are sustainable? So in fact, third party inspections and quality assurance and those kind of third party assistance.
Yeah, it's massively important. And you're looking for third parties that have been around for a long time. They've got a reputation in the industry. They've got a reputation for credibility, independence, trustworthiness. You can't do this on your own. You can't be, you need a third party to come in and vet things, basically, and we all accept that as an industry. It's a matter of how are we working with the right third party? Is it one that you can trust to do the right thing? And I think brands should think very carefully about that issue, because long term, this is the way the industry is. We work far. Brands and retailers work far away from their suppliers, so that they're very dependent on third parties to protect their reputation, basically, because that's what's on the line here. I hope that answers that one.
Yeah, brilliant. I definitely think it's right. It's about, we can't all work alone. So sometimes we need to assist each other in the industry. And You're right. It's finding the right person for the job that's key.
Absolutely, yeah.
So with that, and thank you for that. That's
Thanks.
actually all the questions we have for you today, Brett. So I'd firstly
Thank
like to
you.
thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to get your insight, and we would love to have you again another time if you like.
I'd love to come back, Andrew. It's been nice talking to you, so thanks for that. My pleasure.
Thank you.